Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another edition of Deportes Nation. I'm Alex Parra, with me Victor Araiza, today at Houston Sports Park, the home of the Houston Dynamo FC and also the Houston Dash of the NWSL. Victor, preseason starting for the Dash today. Beautiful day, by the way. Maybe a little bit too much sun for Uncle Alex, but a great way to start. A lot of changes on this team and a coach, Coach Fran, that isn't quite physically here yet.
Not yet, but the hope is that once the visa issues are all fixed up, right, that this could sort of be a good omen, that it will be a sunny season for the Dash instead of we're talking about it just last year. It was cold, it was windy, it was rainy, and we saw what that ended up being, a season with no playoffs after finally getting over that hump, and the look to get back into the postseason this year.
Well, let's talk about the architect of this team, Alex Singer, who's putting together the team not only from the player side, but also from the manager side or the head coach side and everything in between. It's also part of a change of culture that's come not only to this team, but to the league.
Well, it's certainly her team now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she was installed by Ted Siegel, with some of the changes right after he took over the ownership of the club. This is his regime with Jessica O'Neill as the president of the club as well. They decided to move on from Juan Carlos Zamoros, the previous head coach, and he went on to Gotham, won the NWSL championship. Now here they kind of have to, maybe shore things up a little bit. It didn't work out with Sam Bladen in season 1. In the same way that we compare it to the brother club, we can put it that way, the Houston Dynamo, that Pat Onstad maybe didn't get that head coaching hire. It was criticized that first season. Came back, Ben Olsen, they got into the playoffs. This is now what the Houston Dash is looking to do, rectifying some of those things and getting back to success.
And success means scoring, but also great goalkeeping. We spoke also to Jane Campbell, who's been the face of this club for many, many years. She's with the U.S. women's national team. She's the starting goalkeeper. But also she's recognizing 8 years in that things are changing.
They are, but some things have been a constant in a way. Her here at the club, she's been good. Like you mentioned, it goal scoring. That might actually save them a few points. It actually did save them a few points last year. They might have had a worse offseason. When you mentioned scoring, that was the spotlight that it just didn't click. This year they're going to have to put up more goals, to win some more games, to get up the table. I know it sounds obvious, but that has to be one of the key things that the club fixes, and obviously. Maybe with a more motivated Maria Sanchez. I don't know if the contract's gonna help in that sense, but we'll see. We'll see if that puts more responsibility on her to have to put up more of those goals.
Well, and let's talk about that. We mentioned Jane Campbell, who for many years, for many of us, is the face of this club. With the new contract for Maria Sanchez, the commitment to 3 years plus, potentially the amount of money that's being paid, which to me, Victor, I think is amazing. I think it's well-deserved, and I think it's time. The shift now comes to Maria, and she spoke to us a little bit about, not the pressure necessarily, but the commitment she's made. Part of it was also, and Alex Singer told us this, look, it's not only about Maria. Maria also needs players around her to make her and this team successful.
Right, but it takes up more of the budget, right? And like as we've seen in other American leagues, right, when the salary cap isn't all quite there, those are the headaches maybe of the general manager. Those are things that she's going to have to worry about. But. Certainly, I think it does put a little bit more pressure on her as well. I mean, the assists maybe weren't where they needed to be last year. The goals weren't where they needed to be last year. She has to be more of if she's going to be the face of the team, she's got to do it on the field as well. And I think that is going to be one of the talking points of the offseason. And then eventually, what does this mean for Jane Campbell once her time comes up? Because one of the things was Maria's contract was coming up, so that was a key reason for wanting to resign her. But again, this is all part of the building that Alex Singer has to wrestle with.
So the last question, I think, is a question this franchise asks itself, not only on the Dash side, but on the Dynamo side. How can they fill up the stadium? I think it's about telling the stories of these players. That's one of them. But also I think as a soccer community, Victor, also have to somewhat be involved. I'm all for the growth of the sport, especially on the women's side, but they have a tough task ahead.
They do. I always said throughout the years, I think the problems that the Houston Dynamo have, the Dash have it even worse. They have a sort of a fraction of that. If the Dynamo fill up a certain part of the stadium, the Dash filled up an even lesser part of the stadium. They get less of the budget in marketing. They get less of the support in staff and people in the office, right? When we compare, look at how many assistant coaches Ben Olsen has out here. Compare him to the Houston Dash. So I think those are all, maybe that's a question for the ownership group. How much are they in all in on the women's sport and making this viable. Obviously, they also have to make it viable as well with the product, with wins, with getting people out there. I think some of the same things that don't cost a lot that the Houston Dynamo could do, get out in community, bring people out. I think that's certainly something that the Dash have to do as well. But I think it's sort of along the same line. They have to connect with this community. They have to get people out there, and then once they get them out there, they have to keep them.
Look, Victor, I know and I acknowledge every one of those challenges, but I am still optimistic at the end of the day that things are improving. And it may be by little, it may be by a lot, depending on your perspective. So I am optimistic about where the Dash, in particular, where we are today, focusing on them, can go. Why? Because I know on the youth side, there are young men and young women, boys and girls, who are seeing these players and saying, you know what, one day I can do that.
Right.
Names like Ordóñez, names like Sanchez. I think it inspires a lot of people, men, women, whoever you are, that one day you can achieve something like this. So maybe a final word. How do you see the rest of this preseason? A lot of work. They'll be traveling soon and playing games outside, and it's all part of getting ready to see what happens in the NWSL when the season starts.
Yeah, in many ways, it's a long season. Because they start around March, but they finish around September, right? The playoffs, I think, ends like in November. So it is a bit of a mental strength, or mental challenge, right? As the season goes on, can this team stay united? Is how much does the coach get his message through some of the players? When they go through a tough stretch, are they able to dig out of that, or is it going to be like prior seasons where they just kind of are kind of there, they go with the flow? I think the NWSL now has made it easier, if you can, or if you will, to get into the playoffs. And I think that has to be the bar. They have to get in, and that has to be the measure of success.
Victor, a lot to think about as the Dash get ready for the NWSL season to start. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for following us here on Deportes Nation. Have a Victor, I'm Alex. Until next time when we meet here on Deportes Nation.